So, welcome. So glad to see you here today. And, it's these occasions like this that we get to have breakfast. And so, of course, we always have donuts, but this is a little bit more special. And, when there is food and a lot of people gathered, I notice that you guys have certain eating habits. Anybody notice that? You have eating habits? All of us have little eating habits, I think. Does anyone here think they have a strange eating habit? You don't have to, I won't make you tell what it is. All right, a few of you there. And we probably have some of them. Just yesterday, my wife made hot dogs for my son. Actually, we had hamburgers, but Woody wanted a hot dog. And so it's sitting on the bun, okay? It's like the store-bought bun. You can't have it on a regular piece of bread, of course. And so he comes to get his hot dog, and then he notices that part of the hot dog on the bottom is split open a little bit. Have you ever experienced that, where they don't stay attached? Of course, this was unacceptable, okay? And he's like, I can't eat this. And I'm like, what's wrong with it? And he's like, the bread is broken on the bottom. I'm like, it's only this portion. And he keeps massaging it and doing things. He's like, I can't eat it like this. And it starts to break open even more to the point where it opens. And he's like, I'm not going to eat this. And he starts whining and literally crying. And I'm like, are you kidding me, kid? There are kids starving in Africa. Who remembers that? Like, no, they don't care if it's broken apart. They would eat it if it fell in the dirt. Like, you're going to eat that. And it got to the point where I actually take him aside and I go, listen, kid, you're going to have to eat this, and cut the crying, cut the attitude. You're just going to have to eat it. I mean, sometimes we have these little hang-ups when it comes to food, especially when they're kids. I mean, my kids would drive me nuts. I got to a point where I was scared to put food on their plates. Not because I didn't want to put the food on their plate. It was that if I put it in the wrong place, that was it, right? Like, not there, Daddy. It's supposed to go over here. And then, of course, you hear that for the next 5-10 minutes, and you're just like, could you just eat, please? And so we could all eat in peace, and you could just stop crying. But I realized that when I was younger, I also had like this kind of eating habit. And many of us do, because I was told the story of an uncle that I had, and what he would do is he would pile all the food on one spot on his plate. He'd actually put the dessert underneath, and then pile the food on top. And like, we're Italian, so just imagine spaghetti or pasta on top of that, and then a cutlet or something else. And I'm like, that is the grossest thing I've ever heard of. And you're all with me. And I'm just kind of the direct opposite of that. And many of you don't know this because I've been kind of cured over time. But when I was growing up, I would never eat multiple things on my plate. I would keep them all separated. They're not allowed to touch. And I would eat one thing completely. Then I would go to the next thing and eat it completely. And then the next thing and eat it completely. And this is how I lived my life until almost my 20s, okay? And then on into my 20s, once in a while it still reoccurs. My wife will be eating, and it's supposed to be mixed together. She goes, why are you mixing it? And I'm thinking to myself, who are you? This is my body. I'll eat it the way I want it. But she has cooked it a certain way, and they're like supposed to go together. And she doesn't know the turmoil that's going on inside of me, because I know she's going to be upset if I don't mix it. But then there's something inside. I don't even know where it comes from that's like, don't mix it, John. Don't mix it. So I would eat, and there was a portion of time in my teens where I went to live with an aunt and uncle. And so I'm at their house, and I'm eating dinner with them every single night. And my aunt is observing me eat this way. Corn, mashed potatoes, meat, whatever it is. Eat individually. And I didn't realize that it's been driving her nuts. So one day she just goes to me, John, I can't take this anymore. Would you just eat like a normal person? And I'm like, what do you care how I eat, right? I'm thinking to myself, and I'm like, you eat your food your way, I'll eat my food my way, right? And I'm thinking to myself, why do you want to control me? Does it matter? You're eating yours. If you're happy with it, why do you care how I eat mine, right? You're controlling me. And then I even said that, like, what do you care about mine? She goes, you ever think that you're the one who's in the controlling one? I mean, look at the way you eat. And I thought for a moment, wow. I thought it was always you, but maybe I am the controlling one too, right? Because this is the way I have to eat my food. And we know tons of people who have particular habits, don't we? That like kind of drive us nuts, or they have to do things in a certain way, and those are called like the type A people. You know if you're type A, if after your wife has put all the dishes in the dishwasher, that you go and rearrange them so that they're correctly put in there. Okay, we hit a note there, right? It's like, oh yeah, either that or you're just like, John, you are really sick. And so, but ladies, the truth is, if your husband makes the bed and you have to come up behind him and remake it, then maybe you're like the type A, okay? Because you're like, okay, yeah, he was nice of him to do that, but he doesn't know how to do it, so I'll do it for him. See, to some degree, we probably all fill in a category. I mean, I could have gone on and on and on about examples, but we all fill a category there where we like want to be in control in some way, shape, or form with some things in our lives. We want everything to work out the way we want it to work out, not the way our neighbor wants it, or our brother or sister or parents or spouse, right? We want it to work out the way we want to. We want that sale to close because we like, it's good for you, we want you to buy this, right? Or the person that we were interested in high school, or maybe even now if you're single, we want them to be interested in us too, right? Like, I want you, and so you need to want me. I want to control this situation. With my kids, man, I want them to study when I tell them to study. Like, they put it off. No, do it now. I want you to do it now. I want them to clean up when I want them to clean up. I want you to do it now, before dinner, not after dinner. And of course, they're going to keep putting it off. Or we want our employees and our coworkers to act a certain way or behave a certain way toward us. Or maybe we want our spouse to become perfect. Like, okay, if you would just be perfect for me, and I have a list of how that happens, right? The truth is, we're like, oh, John, you're a little weird, but we're all thinking it deep down inside. We all have a little list somewhere. It's the truth. So let's just be honest and get out of the way. And when things don't work out the way we want, we can become frustrated, right? Does that ever happen to you? I mean, you've thought through things, how they're supposed to be, and then it's like it didn't work out that way, and now we're experiencing frustration. And sometimes when you're on that journey to whatever the path is that you've planned out, when you see it starting to tank, that's when anxiety starts rising up in you. Like, this isn't going to work out. You already start to think it's not going to happen. You start panicking, and we kind of lose our peace in those moments. And see, the question we're going to ask today is, how can we learn to deal with this kind of control of balance and stress? Because we want to, and there is a portion of control that we need to have in life, or it's just going to be a mess. But there's also the portion where it gets too much, it's not working out, that we get stressed out. And we've all been there before. We're like, I got to have this work out. And so how do we deal with life when it doesn't go our way or the way it's planned? So today, I think James is going to help us out a little bit. And as you know, we've been in our series, Everyday Faith, following Jesus and real life collide. And so it's a study of the book of James. And James is the brother of Jesus who wrote this book. And today, he's writing to us to help us live out our faith. And this is kind of a big issue at times, because that's when we most lose our faith. That's when we're most stressed out. We wish, okay, I could have done things differently. And so James is going to address control issues with us today. And so we don't have PowerPoint, but instead I'm going to ask you to pull out your program so you can follow along in the verses and fill out the program, the outline. That way you'll help the message stick a little bit better. So the first thing is in James chapter 4, verses 13 and 14. It says, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell, and make a profit. Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away." And so if you're filling out your program here, your notes, control without God is an illusion. Control without God is an illusion. You see, James is creating this scenario. I don't know if he had a person in mind, or maybe this was him back in the day, but he's making up this scenario of a guy that's making plans to go to a city. He's going to go to the city. He's going to set up a business and spend a year there, and he's going to make a certain amount of money, right? Because he's going to buy and sell. And James kind of calls out this idea. He's like, hey, you're making these plans and you've got it all set. You set the place, you set the time, you set how much it's going to be. You've got it all planned out in your mind. But here's the problem. You don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow, right? And so he's not actually saying there's something wrong with plans. But what he's saying is there's an issue if you think you're going to control your life simply by the things that you plan to do. You see, we can't control tomorrow. And this became a reality for most of us when COVID struck, right? A lot of us understood what the heck just happened. We didn't know what tomorrow was going to bring. Most of the reason is because many of us did not ever live through a pandemic in our lives. We're like, this is like the world is changing. I mean, I've never seen it. We thought some people were like, the world is crashing. There were people preaching like from their pulpits, like it's the end times. We even did the book of Daniel just to help us get an idea, a grip on what's going to happen in the end times. Are we there yet, right? Because we're like, this is it. Everything's going. I had a friend, and he had just started a burger franchise, like 2 years before that. That's where it all began, like 2 to 3 years. That's when the planning started. And he found, it was one of these New Burger franchises that was like the fastest growing one in the country. That's how fast it was, how good it was. So he gets in on this. He locates a place where he's going to open a store. In fact, he was going to open 2 stores. So he enters into 2 contracts, and he's getting ready. And so now, of course, there's the build out. But the build out took a long, long time. And so he's like, oh, great. Now we spent extra money and extra time that I didn't have to get this place open. In fact, it got so bad he had to actually get a new contractor to finish the job. He finally gets the business open, and now he's struggling because at that time, December 2018, the owner of the franchise flees the country, leaves the country completely. And so all these franchisees, owners, right, are there without the support that they needed, without all this stuff, and he's like, this thing is blowing up. And then you know what happens 2 months later? COVID. Like, this is a brand new business. We're trying to get it off the ground. We got all these problems. And now COVID, people don't even want to touch food, right? They're not going to touch food that you touch first. That was the whole thing, right? How are we going to make this work? And of course, he wasn't able to make it work. COVID hit the final nail, drove that final nail into the coffin of his business. And so he started starting a business at that time. If anyone here was starting one, well, you know how difficult it was. We started our church at that time. Okay, so that wasn't easy. That's the one thing people say, like, they look at me in awe if I'm talking to other pastors, like, you started during COVID? I'm like, well, it wasn't my plan, right? But we make our plans, but no one knows what tomorrow is going to bring. That's what James is telling us. He says that even our life, though, is not promised to you and I. James says it's like a vapor. It's like a puff of smoke that just disappears. Now, my kids are dying to see snow. They're like, we've never seen it, Poppy. They've seen the fake generated snow. That's not real snow. But they want to see the real thing. And we would take Charlotte back and forth to New England every single year when we were younger. And so one year, when she was kind of old enough, I think she was like 5 or 6, maybe about Woody's age, and we got there, and for some reason, it was a cold night in Boston. And we flew in, and we had this tradition. We go to Faneuil Hall, we get a cup of clam chowder, and then a couple lobster rolls. We eat those, and we walk over to the North End, which is the Italian section. We go to Mike's Pastries, and we get, cannolis and all sorts of stuff. And then we get in our car and drive to my uncle and aunt's house where we're going to stay. Well, as we're walking over to the North End, Charlotte is cold. Now, she's from Florida. She's a Florida girl, right? So think about this, if you've never thought about this. In Florida, it's cold inside and warm outside, right? It's the truth. If you walk outside, it's hot out there. We got AC on in here. She's outside and she's cold. She's like, Mommy and Daddy. She has like this big grin. I'm cold. I'm outside and I'm cold. She doesn't know what to do with herself. And, we're just laughing. And all these people on the street are laughing at her. It's just like, they're getting a chuckle out of this amazement that's going on. But what happens, too, when it gets cold enough, right? We hardly see it here up in Florida. But what happens when that breath comes out of your mouth? Yeah. You actually see it. You see the vapor. But how long does that vapor stay? Right? It gets about here and it's gone, if you're lucky. Right? And so that's what James is saying. He's like, it just disappears. That's what our life is like, this vapor. Now, I don't think it's probably eluded your attention, but Queen Elizabeth passed away, on Thursday, right? I remember Thursday night when I came across one of the news things that I was looking at, and I told Carol, we're like, oh my God, I can't believe it. I mean, this woman has been queen longer than I've been alive, right? She was 70 years she was reigning. And so most of us, even if we're like 80-something, all we do is remember her as queen because we don't remember much before 10, right? So most of us, that's all we've experienced is this woman being queen over England for that long a period of time. That's all we know. But you know what's going to happen once all these articles of all of her pictures and when she was young and the memorial is done? She's just going to drift away into history, isn't she? We're going to forget about her. Sadly, that's just the way it is. But the truth is that someday that's going to happen to you and me too. And that's why the psalmist, he writes this, it's in your outline. He says, so teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Another translation puts it this way, teach us to realize the brevity of life so that we may grow in wisdom. He's like, look at how long life really is and how much time you have so that you'll actually make better decisions, wiser decisions on how you're going to spend your life. The point is, we are not in control or as much control as we think we are when it comes to life. And we think we have to have control, don't we? But none of us knows really what's going to happen. None of us, life is not guaranteed to us, and James is not saying don't make plans. He's not saying that they're bad. In fact, I would encourage all of us to make plans. But he is saying this, that we need to include God in those plans because we don't know what's going to happen. So check out the next line. It's exactly what he says. He says, instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. But now you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So if you're filling out your outline, the next thing is to get a better grip on life, you have to let go. To get a better grip on life, you have to let go. Or you could write, to get more control in your life, you got to let go. And that's counterintuitive, right? Like, I'm not going to let go, right? I thought control was holding on. That's how I control something, not let it go. But I don't know about you, but I remember the first time I ever rode a roller coaster. Now, maybe you do, or maybe you've ridden so many, you're like, I don't remember the first one, or maybe you've never ridden one, and you're like, and I'm not going to ride one. I don't know. But I remember this. I was visiting that same uncle and aunt, and they were living in Canandaigua, New York, which is upper state New York off of Finger Lake. Oh, there we go, back here. All right, good. And so we're there in Canandaigua, and that particular weekend or week or whatever it was we were there, they had one of those small town fairs that had been set up. And so my aunt loves roller coasters, and we're doing all the games, and I don't remember, to be honest, I don't remember anything else about this fair except this one event. My aunt goes, John, let's go on the roller coaster together. Now I'm like 6 years old, and I'm sure this thing was like probably no taller than this building, right? But I thought it was huge, and I'm like nervous, and she's like, it's gonna be fun, you know? She's like crazy, and I'm like, okay, good, all right, you know? So I get in the little roller coaster ride, and it was one of these old, beat up roller coasters. You know, they're mostly metal with the bar that comes down with that pad that's worn away, and then they got a little pad on the side, and it's really a piece of vinyl and wood right behind it. There's no real pad, right? And my aunt was a little large, and so I'm like here. The good news is I had a great cushion on this side. So we start going, and I'm like getting nervous. It's like click, clack, click, clack, click, click, clack, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't take this. I can't stand it. I'm getting higher. So I just kind of grab onto that bar as tightly as I could, and I bury my head like this. And my aunt's like, John, look up. And I'm just like, no. And we're doing the whole ride. The whole time she's like, raise your hands, have fun, laugh. And I'm like this. And we get off the ride, and I'm just like, I'm so glad we got off that ride. And my aunt's like, all I could see was hair and white knuckles. That's all I could see, she said to me. And I was like scared of the roller coaster. Maybe you guys have felt the same way. And here's the thing kind of I learned is that when we're on a situation like that, we tend to hold on even tighter, don't we? I'm like gripping. The more it jolted, the more it moved, the tighter I grabbed that roller coaster. I'm like, I'm just going to hold on for dear life because I'm going to fall out. That's what I was thinking. Because we believe somehow, think about this, we believe somehow that our strength is going to hold us into that roller coaster. Do you realize that the G-forces on most roller coasters, especially today, that's impossible to do? They hit like 4 and 5 Gs. Actually, the one with the most G-forces, roller coasters in the world, is called Tower of Terror at Gold Reef City in South Africa, and it's 6.3 G-forces. Wow. Just so you understand what a G-force is, because sometimes you're like, yeah, G, that sounds cool. You know, I know Mach 1, something G-force. I don't know if anybody saw Tom Cruise in that latest movie, Top Gun 2, whatever. Some people, I want to see it. And he's experiencing G-forces in there, right? And they're like, pushed against the back of the plane. A G-force is basically 1 G is the force of gravity holding us to this earth. So that's 1 G. But now if you double it, that's 2 Gs, 3 Gs, 4 Gs. So let's just say I'm 150 pounds. I'm not. I'm a little higher than that. Let's say we're 200 pounds, right? 5 times 5 Gs is 1,000 pounds on you. Think about that. Can anyone here lift 1,000 pounds? Any squatters here? A couple of you there? We got Joe. See him after for techniques on how to squat 1,000 pounds. Right? So imagine 6.3 Gs. You can't do it. You can't. If there was nothing holding you in, you'd go flying out. Right? That's what happens. You see, we're trying to control something that's impossible to control. I'm on that roller coaster, holding on for dear life, and holding on tighter is not helping. It's not making any difference. That's the point. You see, that kind of ride will just make you feel like you're out of control. And so the tighter you hold on, the more anxiety you feel. Every little jolt, every little bump, every little thing. What I was doing is, okay, oh, got to hold on tighter. Whoa, got to hold on even tighter. And I'm holding on tighter and tighter and tighter. And the truth of the matter is not doing anything. All it's doing is creating more anxiety because I think, okay, I'm going to hold on. I'm going to overcome that dip in the road, that turn, that whatever it is, but it's not really doing anything. And because I know it's not doing anything, more stress, more anxiety, all those things are pouring on top of me. You see, we must realize that we don't have the power to control the roller coaster. That's when I learned, by the way, the secret to enjoying a roller coaster. You guys want to know what the secret to enjoying a roller coaster is?
Don't go on it.
Don't go on it. All right. For those that want to go on it, Gary's right. You got to let go. You got to let go. You got to let your hands in the air. You ever notice when you see the pictures at the end of the roller coaster at Disney, you know, they got all the pictures. You got one guy like this, right? And then you got the other ones going. And it's always the ones with their hands in the air that are enjoying the ride. Because at one point, you got to let go. You got to let go, and it's true. The people that have the most fun are the ones with their hands in the air. When I started lifting my hands off of the control thing, I started enjoying the ride. Because I realized, oh, it's holding me in. Oh, now I can actually just enjoy what's happening. And it did. It held me in place. I discovered that when I let go, I enjoyed the ride. Why? Because of trust. You got to trust that that thing is going to keep you in the roller coaster. The guy who designed it, that he actually designed it in such a way that you're not going to fly out, that you're not going to, get hurt. And so when you begin to trust the designer of that roller coaster and say, yeah, they designed it well, then I'm just going to go and have some fun. And now when I get on roller coasters, I just let myself go limp. And I'm like, whoa, that's so much fun. And I actually enjoy it. And I'm like, that was amazing. You see, life is no different. Life is no different. Life is going to toss you back and forth. It's going to bring things that you can't handle under your own strength. And if we think we're somehow in control, we're not going to be. See, when you trust the designer who is God, that's when you start to enjoy life, even though it seems like it could be out of control. So then every loss or every disappointment, every bump isn't going to stress you out and give you anxiety. Listen to what the writer of Proverbs says. Solomon writes this: trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. Solomon's like, here's the key: let go. If you'll let go, you'll raise your hands, you trust God, then you're going to enjoy the ride. And he's going to direct your path. He's going to be part of your planning. And then your life is going to turn out a whole lot better. You see, the idea that somehow we are in control is an illusion. We believe somehow we can control the results. We can direct the results. We believe if we try hard enough, then somehow we can control the outcome. And to some degree, maybe that's true. But is it going to bring us to the place that we want, that's anxiety-free, that leads to peace, that puts us on the track that God has for us? And that's why we hold on to things when we shouldn't. Sometimes we enable the addicts in our lives, and I don't know if we have any here today, but we think we can change them somehow. If I just give them what they need, or if I just allow this in their life. And I had a friend and his son who was an addict, and in the end it didn't work out very well because they wouldn't let him feel the full weight of his consequences in his life. Because when we didn't do that, because we tried to control it, we're just going to help him, it didn't end up helping him at all. Or when we enable our children not to grow up because we just keep mopping up the messes for them. And then they never learn to grow up and take care of their messes. Or when we become a workaholic ourselves. Because we think if we just work a little bit harder, we'll make it happen. So if I just say an extra hour or two, then I can make it happen. I'm just going to try to control this situation. These are my plans, and if I can get them to happen, then it's going to work out. Or this is sometimes why we let our emotions run out of control, because the feeling of anger or those other feelings that we can have control the situation. And so if we can control that situation, then I'll vent my anger, because then I can make it happen. And it doesn't end up happening, and you just push people away. See, we must realize that God is the only one that can change somebody in our lives. He's the only one who can change us, and he's the only one who can bring the outcome that we really want. Only God can fix the circumstances in our lives as much as we want to try to fix them. And so we have to begin to trust God. If we understand that things are out of our control, and that the outcome is out of our control, then maybe we might just loosen our grip. Because grabbing it any tighter is really not helping us. So James isn't saying don't ever make plans, don't try. In fact, I think we all should, but he's saying, look, if you're not including God in that, then you're holding on to it so tight, then you're not going to enjoy the ride. And it's probably not going to turn out the way you want. We must realize who's really in control. You see, King David wrote these words toward the end of his life. Listen to these words. It's in your outline. Yours, O Lord, is the greatness, the power, and the glory, the victory, and the majesty. For all that is in heaven and in earth is yours. Yours is the kingdom, O Lord, and you are exalted as head over all. Both riches and honor come from you. You reign over all. In your hand is power and might. In your hand it is to make great and to give strength to all. He's like, it's all yours, no matter what. And David experienced turmoil in his life. I mean, his friends, Saul was a friend at one point. Saul's trying to kill him, right? He's on the run. He faced giants. He's hiding in caves, right? He becomes king. But he also recognized that it wasn't by my hand that I become king. God allowed that to happen in my life. You see, he could have believed that it was by his strength, but he recognized that God is in control, and he writes it down and says, listen, God, you're the one. You're in control. It's by your power. It's by your might. And just like the roller coaster, when we trust in the designer, when we trust in God, then we're going to enjoy the ride. We're going to enjoy our life a little bit more. When we trust the designer in life, that's what will happen. You see, the secret is do what you can do and then trust God with the rest. He's not saying just totally don't do anything. But you do as much as you can do, and you trust God to do the rest in your life. Do all that you can do, and at one point, then we just need to trust in God. And so this isn't just a good idea. It's important for you and I. Because our failure to loosen our grip can keep us from moving forward and keep us from what God really wants in our life. And James is going to conclude this area with one last verse, and it says this, therefore, to him who knows to do good and doesn't do it, to him it is sin. So if you want to fill this out, this last one is, your life without God is a waste. Your life without God is a waste. Amen. See, this verse 17 kind of seems out of place. He's like talking about making plans, and he's like, hey, if you know to do good and you don't do it, then that's a sin. Like, okay, why is that there? Because the problem is we spend so much time on our own plans sometimes. And we're overlooking the opportunity maybe to do good because it doesn't fit in our plan. You're like, okay, if you know to do good, but your plan doesn't, it kind of excludes that, then like maybe it's a sin because you were supposed to have done it. See, when we're making plans without God, it ends up becoming a sin. James says that's just sin in your life. And why is something a sin? Have you ever thought about that for a moment? What makes a sin? Why is it sin? Many of us would probably say, well, anything that's outside the golden rule. Anyone know what the golden rule is? What's the golden rule? Nobody knows it? Okay. The biblical one, it says, do unto others as someone to have do unto you, right? That's what you want. And I heard someone say this to me the other day, and they're like, I've been to all these different churches, and he said, I realized this one thing. They all kind of say the same thing. Do unto others as they would have done to you. The golden rule, love one another. I said, okay, that's good. But the rule of love toward others is a great place to start. But here's the problem with the golden rule. It falls short. You might say, what do you mean? It leaves God out of the equation. Because the truth is, you can do good to others and love others without ever acknowledging there's a God in heaven. Think about that for a moment, right? You could do that. And that's exactly what the new atheist movement would have you and I believe. You don't have to believe in God because we can just be good to one another. What do we need religion for? What do we need God for? Because all of us could do that. You don't need God to love others, right? I mean, I do because there are some people that I find really hard to love, right? And you're like, okay, so maybe we're like, yeah, I could use God there, right? But the truth is we could do good to others and still be missing out, because here's what really sin is. Sin is anything that is outside God's will or design for you and me. That's what true sin is. And so we don't love others. Yeah, that's not my design. That's not my will. So yes, that is a sin. But there are other things that are sin too. Why is it a sin to work on the Sabbath in the Old Testament? Why is it a sin to eat shellfish and bats? You're like, the bat one I got. I didn't really want to eat a bat anyway. Unless it may taste like bacon, maybe I'd eat it. Right? Why was it a sin to come to the temple if you had an issue of blood, like a scar or something that was leaking blood? Why was it a sin to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Had nothing to do with me loving someone else. Why? And we could all come up with reasons maybe. We go, oh, well, the dietary laws, oh, this thing, another reason why. We could come up with all these reasons. But here is why all of these things are violating God's rule. Even the golden rule, when we violate that. Why were they sin? Because it's outside of God's design for you and for me. And that's what sin is. We miss the mark. And when we're outside of God's will, we begin to waste our life on a life that God never designed for you and me. Think about that for a minute. So when we stop asking God to come into our plans, and what do you want from my life? And hey, maybe I shouldn't be going down there. What do you think, God? When we stop doing that, we can find ourselves on a path that's outside of God's design for you and me. He's like, there could be sin in your life. And so James is encouraging us because we can spend all of our time making plans. And we can even prosper in the thing we're doing by man's standards. And it is not wrong to prosper. That's not what this message is about. It's a good thing. It's fine to prosper. But if you leave God out of the picture, you can have it all and still have nothing. That's what Jesus was saying to us. It's in your outline. He says, for what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? You can have it all. You can keep prospering. You could look like your plans are all coming true and that you're in total control, but it could still be a total waste at the end of your life if God's not a part of it. The whole point of this section, this one section of James, this little section that he's thrown in there is this. We're wasting our time and our life without God. If he's not there, if he's not a part of what we're doing, like if you're just going off and you're making plans, he's like, hey, slow down. First off, you don't even know what tomorrow's going to bring. And look at the span of your life. It goes so quickly. Why not spend it on something that God wants in your life instead of what you just want in your life? But there is a way to make our lives count. And that is to not waste them. Listen to what Jesus says. It's the verse that actually comes before the one we just read, but he says this, for whoever desires to save his life will lose it. So if you're trying to save your life, you're trying to make all those plans, you're going to end up losing it. It will become the waste. But whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's sake will save it. If you lose your life, you save it. God's kingdom is so flipped upside down, right? If you lose your life, you actually save it. If you'll let go, you'll actually enjoy it. That's how you find God. That's how you find peace, is when we surrender. You don't have to go through life like I rode that roller coaster. I don't want to go through life like I rode that roller coaster. Oh my gosh, right? I never enjoyed that ride. I never did. I don't go back there and think I could have enjoyed it. Maybe I could have, because I didn't enjoy it. And we can go through life doing the same thing, trying to hold on, and this isn't working out. Let me just try harder in this place. Okay, let me just work a little bit over here, or let me just change something about me this way, or change something else. And God's just like, yeah, you're doing all the wrong things. When I was younger, I used to drink heavily because my family situation wasn't a great situation. My parents left, divorced, and they sent us to live with our grandparents who divided 5 kids, so I grew up with only 2 brothers. And I tried to be the good child. I was the one who didn't want to cause trouble. I was the one who was a pleaser. And so by the time I hit my teens, I had suppressed a lot of anger and frustration that I didn't realize was there. And so when I would drink, I began drinking, I would drink and I would get angry. And so this anger would come out in me. And I'm like, why is this anger there? And I thought, I'd watch other people and I'd see, oh, there's a happy drunk. And, and then I'd be, oh, there's an amorous, they want to kiss you. Okay, whatever. And I'm like, I know the solution. If I just change the type of drinker I am, then that'll be fine. Right? So I tried to be a happy drunk instead of an angry drunk. And you know what I was trying to do? Control the situation and change the situation. But at the end of the day, the problem was I wasn't inviting God in, who could then transform and change me. And for us, somewhere along the line, we could be there too. We're on the little roller coaster, we're white-knuckled, holding on as tight as we can, thinking if I can just hold on a little more till the ride is over, then I'm going to be okay. But when you get done at the end of the ride, you find out you wasted it. Because God's got something so much better for you and me. So much more. Something amazing. One that you're going to enjoy. One that you're going to be at peace with. And God will take you there, but the way to get there is it starts with surrender. You got to let go. And if you'll surrender today to God, whatever it is, and I don't know what's going on, and hopefully this message is speaking to you in a certain area of your life, but if you'll be willing to go, okay, God, can you come in here? I'm going to take my hands off the reins. Then God can come in and do some things that you can't even imagine he can do in your life. Let's pray. God, I thank you for your goodness. Lord, sometimes the obvious answer is right in front of our faces, and we keep missing it. God, it's not a surprise if we believe in you that you have amazing things planned for us. It's not a surprise that you're actually the answer to the path and the place that we need to go. But sometimes, God, we just neglect to put you there because it's easier, or at least it feels like we're in control when we're holding tighter. So God, whatever it is today that we're holding on to, Lord, and we shouldn't be, can you help us to let it go? God, just come into our hearts and do something that we've been unable to do, which is loosen our grip and to trust you and to give it to you. God, please take it right now. Lord, we're releasing it to you and trusting, God, that you're going to do a great work. Lord, take this burden off my shoulders. Lord, take these things out of our hearts and minds to want to control. Lord, our children, our spouses, our co-workers, our boss, Lord, whatever plan it is that we're working on, Lord, the person maybe that we're trying to be, Lord, help us to release that to you and let you control it. You were able to make David king, and you're able to do those things in our lives too. So thank you, God, for hearing our prayer. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.